So, Brad, you've written a number of books with the word reality on the title. First question is for you. What role does talking about and understanding truth or reality have in Buddhist practice?
I got into Buddhist practice because I wanted to find out what this world I'm living in was and what this life I'm living in was. And I didn't have a religious upbringing. My family we weren't atheists or anything. We just not, came from a family where nobody really cared about religion or going to church. So I didn't have that sort of a thing going on. So the only kind of idea I had about reality was whatever I got from sort of, I guess you'd call secular society or school or whatever. That I was this sort of meat machine on this rock in space, and my mind was actually just the activity of this lump of hamburger in my head, and all this kind of very materialistic sort of worldview. And I wasn't sure if that was true or not. It seemed it seemed somehow lacking, and I don't know if it was just because I wanted it to be something else, or because it was something else. I wanted to find out what it was, so I went through. I went to a couple of churches, was terribly disappointed, and I ended up finding a Zen teacher in when I was my first year at Kent State University, and he was a student of Kobun Chino Otagawa Roshi, who there's a book out of his talks now called "Embracing Mind." If anybody's interested in seeing what Kobun had to say about things, and I just thought this was a really interesting approach to the problem of finding out what reality was. This shikantaza zazen, which is just sitting, which is a kind of zazen which is completely goalless. You're not trying to have an experience or get anywhere or change yourself or become more mindful or become enlightened, or any of these things you're thinking of that you might be trying to do with a meditation practice. You're just trying to get into the full experience of doing this really, really simple act of just sitting. So I got into that, and that seemed like a really good way to approach this question of what is reality. The the problem, since the question is about talking about reality, the problem is that talking about what one experiences through a practice like that is really difficult. It may be impossible. Kodo Sawaki Roshi, who was the teacher of my other Zen teacher, Guro Nishijima, uh, said that all of Buddhism is just a footnote to Zazen, which I like. That was a nice little quote. That trying to explain what it is. Now, having said that, I find it's useful to me to hear people who have done some of that sort of meditation experience, have had deeper experiences in meditation, talk about their experiences. I found reading Dogen to be extremely useful. Dogen is the 13th century Zen teacher who founded the sort of version of Zen that I do, the Soto Zen, at least in the Japanese branch of it. Apparently came over from China, or he brought it over from China. And he gives a lot of he spends a lot, he wrote a lot. For a guy who died when he was 54 years old, he put out a ton of written material. I'm I'm amazed. I'm older now than he was when he died, and I feel like I can't match his output. But this large output of writing that he created seeks to talk about reality, or talk about the what it is that we are living in, what this place is, and who we are. But it's difficult because you can't give a straight answer. When I first started this practice, I was hoping for a straight answer and getting very frustrated at my teachers for not giving one. Like it's all cheese, or something, like that would explain it all. But whenever I came across versions of that, I just found them silly. I spent I never joined the Hare Krishna movement, but I sort of hung around the fringes of it when I was first a student at university. And they are very good at here's what it is. It's you are the eternal servant of Krishna, and if you're a good person when you die, you'll get to go to Krishna Loka where he lives and hang out with him. And it's very detailed. They have books with paintings in it and that show you what it looks like and everything, and you're like, okay, I got that. But I couldn't accept that. So listening to this rather loose, vague talk that Zen people get into when they talk about the nature of reality, God, it's been so helpful to me. And why is that? I'm asking myself now as I say this. I think it's because it makes me feel like I'm not alone in my feeling that, okay, maybe this standard way of understanding reality is not quite correct. And maybe there is a better approach to things. I don't know what I'm sorry, I should have just said I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. How was that?
That's great. Thank you so much, Brad. I guess the same question to you, Stephen. I could ask it again. What role does talking about, but also maybe understanding truth or reality, have in Buddhist practice, if any, for you?
For me, well, I've struggled with this for pretty much all of my time as a practitioner of the Dharma. And I started, again, a bit like Brad, actually. I mean, I grew up also in a non-religious family, never went to church. Those things weren't really considered to be particularly relevant to the kind of world we lived in anymore. But when I was in a late teen, 18, 19 years old, then I really started, these questions became very central to me, very important. What is the nature of human life? What is the nature of reality itself? And how could we possibly know that? And I started my training as a Tibetan Buddhist of the Gelug school in India, in the community around the Dalai Lama. And the training that I received there was not like Zen at all, as Brad described it, very scholarly, studying classical texts, and with the very clear idea that if you understand this teaching, if you contemplate it, if you then meditate upon it, you will arrive at ultimate truth. Not just any old truth, but the real thing, what is ultimately true. And that insight will free you from the ignorance that keeps you trapped in the cycle of suffering and birth and death. So it's crucially important to get to grips with what reality really is. And I pursued that approach for a long time, but I also became more and more uncomfortable with it for a number of reasons. For a start, there were passages that I was reading in some of these very same texts that were revered that seemed to question that whole approach. Like traditionally, emptiness, shunyata, is considered the nature of ultimate reality, at least in the school in which I was brought up. And then you go to a source text like Nagarjuna, and he says, emptiness is letting go of views, and believers in emptiness are incurable. In other words, that seems to conflict with the whole idea that, this is the ultimate truth. No, emptiness is not some ultimate reality about which nothing further can be said, but emptiness is simply a helpful device for you to get rid of being attached to opinions and views. We find that same idea back in the early Pali texts as well, that holding on to views of what is ultimately true can actually be a huge problem. And I think in a multicultural world like the one we live in, we are fully aware of how many conflicts in the world are the result of people having conflicting claims as to what ultimate truth is, or what truth is, or what reality is. That's a source of incredible conflict. Again, something I think you find quite repeatedly in Buddhist tradition. So I also then got involved in Zen, and I left behind my more philosophical, metaphysical interest in Buddhism, and I kind of, in a way, let go of the whole idea of arriving at ultimate truth. And instead, I became far more engaged with the primary questions that human life, in a sense, reveals to us in each moment. What does it mean to be this person? And I trained in a Korean Rinzai school, in which the koan, the question that we asked, was the question, what is this? And it goes back to an encounter between two monks in 8th century China, Huineng and Huaijiang. And Huineng asks Huaijiang, what is this thing? How did it get here? And Huaijiang was speechless. And he spent 8 years in the monastery. It doesn't say what he did. But at the end of that time, he went back to Huineng, and Huineng said, what is it? And Huaijiang said, to say it is like something misses the point. To say it is like something misses the point. And that, to me, is kind of where I am with this particular question. I'm interested in the questions rather than the answers. And if I arrive at some understanding or some insight, I must hold that lightly. It might be helpful, it might be useful, but if I rigidly hold it as reality or truth, I have, I think, in that very act, turned it into a problem. Again, Nagarjuna has this idea that seizing hold of the Dharma is like handling a snake. If you handle it in the wrong way, it will turn back and kill you. The Dharma is dangerous in that sense. And if we turn it into an access to some ultimate truth, metaphysical truth, I think we actually go completely against the current that it's trying to engage us in. So letting go of truth is for me very, very much part of my practice now, to be very wary of such claims and simply to respect what the wise of the world, as the Buddha called them, the kind of conclusions at which they have arrived. And I like in this respect the whole idea of scientific truth as something that's, it's not final, it's not the last word on anything, it's simply where we currently have arrived in our understanding of how the world works. But we've come up with propositions that are falsifiable. In other words, we can move on in that inquiry. And I like that. I find that a much more healthy way to work with this question of truth. And rather than truth, and again, Buddhism is full of truth, Four Noble Truths, the two truths, ultimate truth, to think in terms of tasks, to think in terms that emptiness, for example, is not a truth, but emptiness is actually suggesting I do something. And in this particular case, it's dropping my opinions, dropping my views, or noticing that I have opinions and views. Because the problem with opinions and views is that they kind of leave me stuck and trapped. I can't really go anywhere with that. And they might be helpful, they might be useful to some degree, but in terms of how I respond to my life as it unfolds moment to moment, I'm more interested in how do I respond to it appropriately, ethically, wisely, kindly, compassionately, rather than understand or have some view as to what it really is, what the truth of the situation is. I don't find that language so helpful anymore.